Hello, hello. Welcome to Down the Well. I am your host, Elle Rowley, and I am so glad that you're here. As I explored in the episode From Maiden to Mother to Matriarch, I have become obsessed with generating new vision for the important but underestimated second half of our lives as women. This phase has so much potential as our children age and we can align our increased capabilities, gifts of motherhood, with increased time as those mothering duties taper a bit. I hear adult children actually take a lot of work too, but priming us for even deeper impact. Contrary to popular opinion in our youth-centric culture, we are more ready for meaningful influence and contribution in the best and most exciting way than ever in this later phase of our lives. In order to look forward to envision this phase of our lives, however, we must first look backwards. This episode will hopefully be the beginning of an ongoing series within Down the Well called The Portrait of a Matriarch, where I profile different older women through history or today who we can glean wisdom from. So today, we will learn 5 lessons from someone who has mostly slipped from public consciousness, but who is actually one of America's greatest matriarchs historically, one of my greatest heroes, the primitive American folk painter, Grandma Moses. I first heard of Grandma Moses from my dear friend Eleanor, who was also a painter several years ago when I was in the middle of transitioning out of my work as the CEO at Solly Baby. I was telling her that I was nervous for the shift since running Solly Baby for the previous decade was, at that point, deeply enmeshed with my own identity. I was excited to get offline and to focus more of my time to my family, but that also felt really vulnerable. I know I'm not the only one who fears that in this digital short attention span, soup du jour society. It feels like if you step out of the working world or social media world for a minute, you will become irrelevant overnight. And I can't say that's not true. Lost momentum is very difficult to regain wherever it is. It's like that Portlandia episode where Fred Armisen is talking with friends. I think it's Fred Armisen. And he mentions that he got off Facebook and he literally starts to disappear in the frame. Like that's the subconscious fear, right? It's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, did it make a sound? Well, it's like if a person does something and they don't post it on social media, did it really happen? That is the question, right? Okay, I digress. You get what I'm saying. So I tell Eleanor this and the pressure I felt to know already what I was doing next, even though I didn't want to do anything at the time at all, except just tend to my family. And she says very nonchalantly to me, yeah, but you'll just be like Grandma Moses. She was like 80 when she started painting. I was like, who? So she told me a bit about this woman who they called Grandma Moses, who was a housewife on a farm, turned wildly successful painter in her late 70s. Like she started painting at like 76. Okay. I immediately felt inspired and connected to this story. So I went home and started studying her life. And as one does, became completely obsessed with her art. I've always loved folk art. In fact, this painting right here is a painting by her son, Forrest Moses. I love this painting. Forrest trained under his mother, and Jared, my husband, gave me this painting as a Christmas gift last year because, I mean, it's beautiful, and her paintings are millions of dollars, but it's like kind of sweeter in a way that it's her son, like it's her legacy that lives on. Okay, so a brief sketch of Anna Mary Robertson. She's born in 1860 on a farm in upstate New York. She has a labor-intensive but really sweet upbringing on a farm in spite of 3 of her siblings dying quite young. She's hired out at 12 as a housekeeper to an older couple, like fully moves in with them. She loves being with them and she learns a lot of skills while she's there. She learns to cook really well and just to tend to a household really well. She works at another farm as a young woman, like once that couple, actually, I think they both pass away. And she meets her husband at this new farm. Her husband being Thomas Moses. They marry, they have this really congenial, sweet, loving companionship, and they move to their own farm in Virginia that they rent or lease out. They work hard. She becomes like a master at making butter, preserves, making potato chips, and all kinds of things on the farm to contribute, like in all of these different phases of her life on different farms that they live on. They have 10 children, 5 of whom are tragically stillborn. They move back to upstate New York to be near family, and her kids go off and get married, mostly staying close by. Her daughter dies of a brain hemorrhage, and she raises her granddaughter without complaint as her own, despite being quite a bit older at this point. She liked making worsted or like embroidery art, paintings out of yarn, but she gets arthritis. Her knuckles can't handle it. Her hands really, just can't handle the work. So she starts painting a little bit here and there, mostly like Christmas cards, little pictures for gifts, but she receives no formal training, hence the name like primitive painter. Her husband dies when she's 67, and then she begins to paint in earnest at about 75, 76, and she brings her paintings along with her preserves to a local fair to sell. She sells out of the preserves, but she doesn't sell a single painting, okay? She keeps going anyway. She displays some of her pictures, as she called them, at a drugstore in town. And one day, a New York City art collector happens to stop in while driving through. He loves her paintings. He just instantly is drawn to them. He buys them all and basically discovers her. He gets her address from the pharmacist, goes to her house, and starts buying more to show in New York in galleries. They do well, and he then puts her in a show at the Museum of Modern Art. Her first one-woman show is called What a Farm Wife Painted. I just love that title. She becomes wildly famous. Her pictures are on Christmas cards everywhere, and in galleries all over the world. She is also just endeared to the public for her practical wisdom and total indifference with which she accepts all of this attention. She's commissioned by presidents, awarded, interviewed on television. She makes over 1,600 paintings before she dies at 101. For a lot of reasons, this story of Grandma Moses has given me so much peace over the last few years. Anytime I've wanted to rush my life, when I want my kids to grow up faster, or I'm just being hard on myself about not doing enough, it's not an overstatement to say that Grandma Moses helped give me the courage to step out of Solly Baby, slow down, stop chasing the ever-moving carrot, and to explore other parts of myself. Solly Baby was just my first iteration, not my identity. It just really helped to frame that story. And after reading her autobiography and another biography of her life and another one, I have moved from admirer to full-on fangirl. She was just a fountain of wisdom and experience, and her words have never felt more relevant or applicable than they are today. So I'm excited to share with you. Okay, so there's a little background, but what I really wanted to share are my top 5 lessons on how to be a matriarch gleaned from the life of Grandma Moses. Let's do this. Okay, number 1. Grandma Moses never stopped progressing, and she let her intuition drive that progress. Okay, reading Grandma Moses's autobiography, it's clear that she was not a super ambitious, driven to excellence kind of adventurer. Okay, she had a practical way of approaching the task at hand. She continually worked at things until she got better, and she embraced the process every step of the way. Like, it was really about the process. It wasn't about this end result. I would say that this quality is the crowning quality of every matriarch that I've studied. She doesn't stop contributing. She doesn't stop progressing. And it is her intuition that guides her progress and her contributions. Never to be confused with busyness, though, or perfection. And she always does it in an unhurried way. She doesn't need to prove anything to anybody. It's a pattern that you can see very clearly and very early on in her life. She worked and worked at churning butter until she was the best in the region, Same with her apple butter and her potato chips. And that muscle that she developed of unhurried persistence brought about excellence over time. And she was proud of the work that she did, whether it was painting, a painting hanging in the Museum of Modern Art, or sewing and keeping up her house. In fact, she seemed to be even more proud of her work at home. After detailing how to make a barrel of soap, like very detailed, okay? She writes, "That was the woman's work. We were thrifty, nothing wasted, nothing lost." This statement was more definitive than almost any other about her work as an artist that she writes. In fact, she wrote an essay when she was just 14 called "Let Home Be Made Happy." And in it, she shares her vision of nature, but also domestic family life and the value of it, and actually how the two are connected, nature and domestic family life. It's really beautiful. And I wish I could read it here, but I'll just share it on my Substack because it's not written up anywhere on the internet. And I think we could do with more words of reverence and respect for the domestic life. So I'm excited to share that. She seemed to approach every project and phase of her life with this kind of unhurried but persistent, like I said, seeking to improve approach. She wrote in her autobiography, "Painting's not important. The important thing is keeping busy." Remember that this is in the early 1900s, so she doesn't mean run yourself ragged, sign up for all the things, lose sleep. I think what she means is stay productive, stay active, keep going. It's not the painting or finding the thing that's going to fulfill you, it's the process. Later, she writes, "If I hadn't started painting, I would have raised chickens." Like, same, okay? Famous painter, raising chickens in the backyard, whatever, it's the same. I approach it with the same process. I would have found the same fulfillment in either one. I think it's easy to underestimate the skills that we develop as mothers. Mothers are often incredible at handling complicated logistics. I mean, we have to, right? Conflict resolution, and we become highly efficient with time. When I was CEO at Solly Baby, I loved hiring mothers because they could do more with 5 minutes than most people could do with an hour. Most of these skills develop over time, though, and of course, we're all different, but they are easy to miss and therefore easy to miss building on. I promise as a mom, you are developing different skills, whether you realize you are or not. They may not be those ones, but you are developing skills. So what can you transfer those hard-earned skills you've developed in motherhood to? As kids age, it's easy to think our capabilities are waning as well, but they're really only just becoming honed in. We step into the matriarch archetype or phase as our kids grow and a sense of mastery comes upon us. But it doesn't just happen. It takes awareness and intention and an absolute commitment to continual progression. It's never been easier to check out, to coast, to disconnect or outsource everything. But in doing that, we lose a lot of our self-esteem and our connection to other people. We all want to contribute and to feel like we belong. Her biographer wrote, "She continued to the very last her earnest endeavors at improving instead of just making it easy for herself." How easy would it have been at 76 when Grandma Moses's knuckles hurt from arthritis and she's wrapping them as scarves every night to say, "Okay, I'm done with my hands." Instead, she picked up a paintbrush, finding it easier on her joints than an embroidery needle, and she just started painting. Yeah, what was the result? Sure, there was money, fame, and whatever, but really it kept her alive, happy, and youthful. Those were the things that she talks about. And it kept her youthful in the very best way. In her 90s, she wrote, "I felt older when I was 16 than I ever did since." It actually gives me a lot of compassion for my 16-year-old. It's hard growing up. She says, "Even now, I am not old. I never think of it. Yet I am a grandmother to 11 grandchildren. I also have 17 great-grandchildren. That's a plenty." Our world today is one of a tyranny of choice. We have so many choices that it's almost debilitating. And though it is a privilege, it can also be dizzying to figure out what we want to do, which can lead to a lot of buffering and busyness that's not productive or meaningful, like taking in empty calories, right? So how do we decide what to do? I think we can take a page out of Grandma Moses's book. It seems to me that she, without overthinking it, she very naturally looked around at what was needed and the time she had, the resources allotted to her, and where her intuition was guiding her. And she went there. Whether it was moving states, getting married, becoming a dairy farmer, selling preserves, making art, she trusted her gut and she acted on it. She writes, I am not superstitious or anything like that, but there is something like an overruling power. I never thought that I would do such work. I never know how I'm going to paint until I start in. Something tells me what to go right on and do. We don't have to get lost in the paralysis of thought. Once we get a bit of that direction or intuition, we need to move forward. She said it so simply. Anyone can do it. If you have a desire for something, don't hold yourself back. Okay, second lesson. She was authentic and she didn't need external validation. Authenticity requires this special balance of confidence to be yourself and not seek the approval of others. Probably why she felt older when she was 16, but also the humility to be vulnerable and to look dumb sometimes, right? So it's this confidence and humility combo. Out of this balance comes real wisdom, though, and humor. She's so funny, both of which Grandma Moses shared generously in her old age. From her autobiography, she says, I have written my life in small sketches, a little bit here, a little bit there, in small sketches, and I have tried to make them real. You can feel that realness in her writing and especially in her art. I think one reason that her art is so moving is because of the feeling of authenticity, of her authenticity. Her scenes are simple and even some are like cartoon-like in some ways, but they are real. You can feel the confidence and the humility. She's not apologizing, nor is she trying to make anything grander than it was. She was without guile or pretense, and that is what makes them beautiful. What a lesson. One of my favorite paintings of hers is called Moving Day. It's just a simple painting of people from the community helping a family move out of their house. The people's faces are nondescript, almost like a child painted them, their faces, and yet there is still this tenderness to it, a goodness about it. And thank goodness she didn't waste her time trying to be Rembrandt, right? And instead she focused on being Grandma Moses. That's how we got these paintings. If you could get your ego out of the way, not waiting until whatever it is you want to do is perfect, what would you do? What would you put out in the world? What imperfect contribution might you make that might inspire or help others? Let's not call it humility or imposter syndrome when it's actually just ego and we all have it, right? Can we let go of that and just create more like Grandma Moses? I can really relate to this in the creation of this show, actually. For years, I've wanted to do this show, but I told myself that I didn't know enough. I needed another degree. I needed to be an expert. I needed to specialize. I needed to long list, okay? But really, I didn't want to look stupid. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. My husband kindly called me out on it one day and he just said, what if you were just willing to be wrong? What if you were willing to sacrifice yourself in that way? Who might you be able to help? What if someone needs to hear your words? Just one person. But the cost is that you need to be willing to look dumb. Would you do it? Well, Grandma Moses was definitely willing to do it. Okay, she was willing to sacrifice her ego. And I think she'd done it long before she became a painter. She didn't sell, remember that county fair? She didn't sell a single painting, just her preserves, but she didn't take that as a sign that she just shouldn't, be a painter. She should be a jam maker. She wanted to paint, so she did it. And she put them in the drugstore down the road instead of the county fair. Okay. I love this excerpt from the New York Herald Tribune in 1953, written about Grandma Moses, just the impression that she made on a crowd. It says, for all who suffer from what might be called living strain, we need to bring that phrase back, and many do complain about the malady, a few minutes exposure to the presence of Grandma Moses is powerful therapy. On Tuesday, this 93-year-old lady made one of her rare trips to the city from her upstate home in Eagle Bridge, New York, to appear at the annual Herald Tribune Forum. Some said that she stole the show. Others were impressed with her astonishing vitality, her mental alertness, her humor, simplicity, graciousness, enjoyment of the occasion, and so on. The plain fact is, everybody felt reinvigorated while in her presence. He goes on to say, she holds within herself an utter unawareness, the wisest secrets of life, secrets composed of many elements, yet as natural and immediate in their expression as a child's smile. While many distinguished persons were appearing before the forum, a little old lady of 93 stepped into their midst and endeared herself to all by her simple aliveness. Most people can't handle fame without it ruining their lives or relationships in some way, but she couldn't have cared less about the attention. She had fun, but she never breathed it in. She wrote, "As for the publicity, that I'm too old to care for now." In an interview with Jean Hurley, she said, "Then he asked me how it feels to be famous and what I think of those millions of Christmas cards made from my pictures. Oh, I don't think about fame much. I keep my mind on what I'm going to paint next." What an amazing perspective. Okay, of 169 handwritten pages of her autobiography, only 37 deal with the years in which she had become a world-famous artist. Her biographer writes, an indication of how little importance she attached to her success as a painter as compared to the vivid recollections of the full life she had become before as farm wife and head of a large family. I can't help but think her being so rooted in family, community, productivity, and the earth helped her to keep her authenticity and to resist that pressure to inflate herself. She just stayed so grounded. One of my favorite passages from her life captures this. She writes of springtime, feeling near to God's intentions, near to nature, where in some respects we are free, where there is beauty and tranquility, where we sometimes long to be quiet and undisturbed, free from the hubbub of life, having time on the farm when they gather the grain, fruit, and berries of all description, and the little folks gather the eggs, when the church picnic comes and the children can have all the cake and lemonade they want, watermelon and peanuts. What a wonderful treat. Okay, let's move to Grandma Moses's third lesson on being a matriarch. She let her challenges refine her, but not define her. One of her biographers wrote, no doubt some present-day critics find the world of Grandma Moses too simple, too unproblematic, lacking in the awareness of strife and grief that overshadow our lives. Although she certainly had experienced them, what she expressed in her art are the everlasting sources of vitality from which man draws his strength, courage, and hope. It's not a little thing, right? It's fascinating to me the way we want to problematize everything now, especially happier, successful people, instead of learning from them. We say, well, they had it easier, they're faking it, they had family money, whatever it is, instead of just humbling ourselves to learn from people who might have some wisdom to share, right? In spite of Grandma Moses's idyllic scenes, although she also painted fires and storms and darker themes, but she's just so good at making everything beautiful, right? How dare she? She had many challenges in her life. Remember 3 siblings dying in their youth from measles, 5 stillborn babies of her own, poverty, leaving the house at 12 to work, her parents dying in her, I think she was in her 20s, early 30s, almost no formal education, wars, sickness, the loss of her spouse, the death of her adult daughter, leading to her raising her granddaughter. But her perspective is that of a matriarch. She never backed down from a challenge. She kept moving forward. She never let those challenges define her. She just continually became refined by them. She learned, she evolved. When her daughter Anna died from the brain hemorrhage that she had as an adult, she stayed to help her son-in-law and their 2 kids. And she writes, I took care of the house and the 2 children, the same as I would have at home. Before Anna died, she had promised her daughter Frances a birthday party, and after she was gone, we gave her the birthday party just the same. I mean, that takes some strength as a mom and a grandma. I mean, there's not a lot of sentimentality in her writing, but it's her actions that say it all. She never saw herself as a victim. She didn't give up. She didn't have a pity party, though I'm sure that she mourned and grieved. She gave, she healed, she sought to make awful situations a little less awful. And that gave her strength. Is that not the power of the matriarch? But where did this strength come from? It was striking to me that the first 5 or 10 pages of her autobiography are about her family history and the things that they overcame. There is a sense of pride in her storytelling of her ancestors. I can't help but believe that these stories, this connection to her past, informed this part of her identity. The part that said, I can do hard things, don't give up, let's keep going, don't let those things define you. Their stories were her stories. Just the other night, my 8-year-old daughter, Hazel, who is named after her great aunt Hazel on my husband's side of the family, she was reading these stories of her namesake, a woman that she'd never met. And she's reading these stories of great aunt Hazel's life from a little spiral-bound book that my mother-in-law made for her when I was pregnant with Hazel. It gives a brief life sketch of great aunt Hazel and a few of the qualities that my mother-in-law loved about her. Hazel, my Hazel, absolutely treasures these stories, and they are clearly becoming a part of her identity and how she sees herself. I just think it's fascinating. There's so much power in this, but we live in a culture that does not like looking back to the past. So it takes intention to do this. One of my favorite stories that she tells, that Grandma Moses tells, is when their well dried up when she was a child during a drought. Okay, finally a terrible storm comes, giving them the moisture, but it floods their house and does a lot of damage. As they clean up, though, her father says, just very practically, no great loss without some small gain. And they rebuilt, and they were grateful for the water. And I think it's interesting that she included that story. You can tell how that becomes a part of her, the way that she approaches the world, a part of her perspective. They made everything when she was growing up, or they traded with neighbors. She didn't even go to a store until she was like 9 or 10. She said she was a little afraid in the store, and she hid behind her mom's dress. But one time, her parents promised her a red dress in town, something that she'd never had. So she's beside herself with excitement. But when they get there, the stores are closed, and so later, her father buys her a red dress, but really it's brown, which of course is very disappointing to her as a young girl. Nevertheless, she wrote, I have found after years it is best never to complain of disappointments. They are to be. Again, that just kind of practical approach to life. And I can hear everyone saying, but what about validating our feelings and processing emotions? It's okay to be disappointed. Of course it is, okay? But sometimes, especially when it's about a dress, don't we need a reminder to not indulge in our disappointment sometimes? Feeling disappointment is one thing, complaining is another thing, and it doesn't serve us. In my life coach training, we call this story fondling. I love that phrase. Some stories can just be let go of, and you see this pattern in her writing and in her life. Grandma Moses always seemed to find the silver lining in everything, and she lived out of a place of gratitude. At Thanksgiving, she wrote, Thanksgiving, Given, in some homes there will be rejoicing, in others there will be sorrow. But we that can give thanks should. There is so much to be thankful for, and praise God for all blessings and the abundance of all things. Let's end that one there. Okay. Number 4, she took on responsibility, but she never took life too seriously. I think that that's a theme here with these matriarchs. As they get older, they find the balance of things. They're not so extreme. They're like, I'm this, I'm confident, and I'm humble. I'm responsible. I'm not going to take it too seriously, okay? And especially in motherhood. In a day of helicopter parenting and obsessing over everything we say and do and feed our children, I was tickled by Grandma Moses' simple description of her parenting. She says, I didn't bring up the children. They kind of come up. They were always with me in the house helping till they started school. It's like one of the only things she says about it, even though she adored her children, was this amazing mom. Parenting wasn't even a word, much less a verb, until the 1950s. Did you know that? I'm not saying there aren't a lot of good things from the idea of parenting. But when we're being too hard on ourselves as mothers, let's remember Grandma Moses saying, they kind of come up, right? I mean, it's just like a breath of fresh air. Less is more, and the kids are gonna be all right. That's what I get from that. Here are a few other funny things that she said about being a mother. She says, I don't think I ever lost my temper and got real wild like some folks. Even when I was young, when I get angry, I just keep quiet and I think, ish kabibble. What the meaning of ish kabibble is? I don't know, but it's a byword. Something like the devil take you. If you lose your temper, you do something and say something which you wouldn't if you waited a few minutes. And then she says, but a flash of temper is sometimes better than to brood over things and feel revengeful. That kind of pries on your mind when you get like that. She was no repressed Stepford wife, that's for sure. She was doing her best and she clearly cared, but she wasn't too hard on herself when she didn't show up at her best. Moses also talks about her boys playing pranks at their house, and the day that she received some feedback from a young woman staying at the house, she writes, then one of the sisters said she would not stand for it if she was me. I told her to let them have fun while they're young and could. It would be something to laugh about when they were old. And now they do. It was a rollicksome, happy house. And their father would join in with them. He really was one of them. Knowing what to correct our children over is such a tricky one, but the perspective of a grandmother, someone who's been through it and seen how it plays out, is, again, it's just like a breath of fresh air. This is why we need matriarch voices to help us chill out and know what we're actually going to care about in 10 years, even 50 years, right? She helps us keep it in perspective. Of course, she also took things seriously too and had her own opinions. Remembering the time when women were given voting rights, she wrote, I voted for the first time before Anna went away from home. I think women should vote. They have to make a living just the same as the men do. So why should they not have a say-so? Some women are more capable holding office than some men are. They can belong at home, but to keep up the home, they should have a say how it is run. Since women commence to vote, they have more freedom. They don't have the drudgery they used to have too. With education and voting, they have more to say how the children should go to school. I especially love the few things that she said about her marriage to Thomas. Their love and respect for each other was obvious, but the secret of their marriage seemed to be that they worked as a team. She writes, I believed when we started out that we were a team, and I had to do as much as my husband did. Not like some girls, they sit down and then somebody has to throw sugar at them. I was always striving to do my share. They worked not just on a team, but on the same team. It was not about power or keeping score. They envisioned life together and went about making it happen together, over and over on each farm with each move. The happiest marriages that I have seen or found are ones where there's first love, but also this common goal, like Grandma Moses and Thomas had. Okay, number 5. She was not afraid of death. I think this feeds right into why we have lost the path of the matriarch. We are afraid of death, so we're afraid of aging. So we don't want to see the older woman who reminds us of both of those things, right? But not too long ago, the relationship we had with death as a culture was very different. It had to be. It was much more a part of everyday life as life expectancy was shorter, deadly illnesses were more rampant, and faith in an afterlife was stronger, which I just have to believe reduced the fear of it. Grandma Moses was not overly religious, I'd say, but faith was in the fabric of everyday life for her. Church was the community center, and death was very much a part of her life at every phase of her life. So she had to contend with it, which made her not afraid of it over time. She writes a story from when she was about 8. She says, "My worst memory goes back to the time when I first commenced to realize what the world was like, and I used to worry. I remember one summer that my mother wasn't well, and we children were afraid she was going to die. I would go to bed at night and cry, afraid mother was going to die. The first death I remember was a young man that lived in the tenant house. I suppose he had what was called cancer of the stomach, and mother had been down and sat with him all the day before he died. The day of the funeral, she told me that I should go down and go in to see him. That's the first dead person I've ever seen. I was probably about 8 years old. My mother went in to look at him, and his sister went in with us and took the pennies off of his eyes, and I thought that was the funniest thing. But since then, I have heard them say, why, they'd steal the pennies off of a dead man's eyes, but she put them back on again." First of all, she's so funny. Second of all, what a wise mother she had. She knew that her daughter needed to learn about dying. This was going to be a part of life. I love that she remembered her mother sitting with the man the whole day before he died as well. There should be community in death, that we support each other. Is it just me, or do we tend to do the opposite? We tend to overexpose children and teens in our culture to media that's crass, violent, immoral, profane, and in the most superficial ways that prepares them for nothing. It just desensitizes them to the good. And then we underexpose them to actual challenge, to things that are dark or even tragic, but are natural and could be understood better with our guidance. When writing about her 3 siblings who died from the measles over just 6 years, she says, "We had to take the bitter with the sweet always. Those children could have been saved nowadays, since the vaccine for measles came out later in her life. The doctor could not have done any good at that time. Mother was very matter of fact, and she said, 'As you are born, you must die.' And father took it that way too." There's a practicality to her mother's approach that I think we miss sometimes that actually gives kids more security. When we aren't afraid, it makes it easier for them to be less afraid. Lastly, I can't stop thinking about the CBS interview that Grandma Moses did with Edward R. Murrow in 1953. He was so impacted by her words in this interview that he had them read at his funeral. So he says to her, "What are you going to do for the next 20 years, Grandma Moses?" Without faltering for a second, seriously and calmly, she raised her hand and said, "I'm going up yonder. Naturally I should. After you get to be about so old, you can't expect to go on much farther." Murrow says, "But you don't spend much time thinking about it or worrying about it, do you?" Grandma Moses says, "Oh, no. You don't worry because you think, well, what a blessing it will be to be all united again. I'm the last one left of my sisters and brothers." He says, "So this is something in a sense that you have no fear about or no apprehension?" "Oh, no. Go to sleep and wake up in the next world. I think that's the way. Did you ever know when you went to sleep?" And he says, "No, I don't think so." And Grandma Moses says, "When the last thought came, you didn't know." And he says, "Well, no, that's true. You might wake up the next morning and think, well, that's what I was thinking about, but you didn't know when that last thought came. Well, that's the way when you'll go to sleep." He was so poised and aloof, so visibly taken off guard by the turn of the conversation, and closed the interview then with these words, "Well, you will leave more behind you than most of us will when you go to sleep." It is undeniable that this is true, but I think that we can also take that as a challenge to resurrect the matriarchs like Grandma Moses. Let's learn from them and let's seek to become like them. I wanted to end with the last words of her autobiography, the wisest words I think that we could live by. She wrote, I have written my life in small sketches, a little today, a little yesterday, as I have thought of it, as I remember all the things from childhood on through the years, good ones and unpleasant ones. That is how they come, and that is how we have to take them. I look back on life like a good day's work. It was done, and I feel satisfied with it. I was happy and contented. I knew nothing better and made the best out of what life offered. And life is what we make it. Always has been, always will be. I hope that you enjoyed this first portrait of a matriarch featuring Grandma Moses, and that we can all lean in to that matriarch in each of us a little bit more. Until next time, thanks for being here.